Hey guys, what's up? I'm Ethan, and today I want to talk about how music is everywhere, even in the places you don't expect to find it. I'm a musician, and I love to write, record, and play music. Recently, I was trying to find some new and creative sounds to put into my songs. I started looking up sampling. If you're not familiar with sampling, it's basically just using an audio recording as an instrument. Usually you adjust the pitch or length of the sound to make it more musical. Sampling started in the early 1960s with the invention of the mellotron. The mellotron is a really cool instrument. It uses tape recordings of other instruments and plays them in a loop. So every time you push a key down, it plays a loop of an instrument. Not only can you play just one instrument, but you can play lots of instruments all at once. The left hand lets you play this little accompaniment thing, which I think is pretty cool. So you can be playing a little flute or trombone sample on top, and on the bottom have drums, bass, guitar all playing at the same time in this little tape loop. There were definitely a lot of setbacks that came with the mellotron though. Every time the loop restarted, you could hear the tape reset, so you couldn't hold the keys down too long, and so the sound wasn't very continuous. The mellotron was really unreliable. Because of all the tape loops and all the mechanical pieces, it tended to break down a lot, which meant not a lot of bands could take them on tour. Bands did like to use them in the studio though. Here's a great example of Paul McCartney playing one for the Beatles on Strawberry Fields Forever. That main flute part that you can hear is actually the mellotron. There are actually videos of Paul McCartney playing the mellotron recently online. If you look up Paul McCartney and mellotron, you can find them on YouTube, and they're pretty cool. The development of the computer made sampling much easier, and this guy from Australia named Tony First made the first computer instrument. It was super expensive, but it could sample, and you could record your own samples. Here's a great example of the band Yes with a Fairlight playing the orchestra hit Patch. This is an example of one of my favorite sounds that the Fairlight makes. It's the sound of someone singing, but its pitch is definitely a little different than it originally was, so it sounds different. This is from Phil Collins' old band, Genesis, and the song is called Domino. The Fairlight was followed by lots of other cheaper digital samplers. Cheaper being a relative term in this case, since they were still like $3,000, but some examples of these would be the EMU 1, 2, and 3. My favorite example of a sampler is probably from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, when he uses one to pretend that he's sick on the phone.
Hi, Ferris, how's your bod? Oh my God, you're dying?
Uh-oh.
If I had one of those, I'd use it for that. As I read about sampling, I realized that there are a lot of sounds around us every day that could be used as instruments, but we just can't control them as instruments. For example, a rubber band. Who hasn't plucked one of those and tried to make a song out of it? Or blowing on a bottle. Or that really annoying sound you can make with your straw when you have a soda cup. I decided to sample these sounds and make a song out of them. Since I don't have the thousands of dollars to buy an actual hardware sampler, I decided to just use my $0 to buy a free software sampler on my computer. Now we're going to get into the fun part where I'm just going to make a song right in front of you guys, Bob Ross style.
Now let's have some fun. Let's have some fun.
First off, when I make a song, I like to start with the drums. And in this case, I wanted to use kind of a drum set setup, but no actual drum set sounds. The first thing I wanted was a good snare-ish sound. If you don't know what a snare drum is, it sounds like this. As I was thinking about this, I got a little hungry, so naturally, I went to Chick-fil-A. Anyway, I realized that when I was finished with my drink, the ice in the cup kind of sounded like a snare drum. I recorded it, and I made a couple different sounds with it. I made this like weird sloshing sound that sounds like this. Then I panned that around so it kind of moves back and forth from your left ear to your right ear. So I think that's kind of cool. I don't know how I'm going to use it in the song, but I think it sounds cool. And then I made a couple of snare sounds, so they sound like this. When they're all chopped up, of course. Before they sounded a little bit more like this. But that's my Chick-fil-A cup. That's not all I used it for, don't worry, there's more to come. The next thing I needed was a good bass drum sound, and the first thing I thought of was to use an Amazon box. So I went and got this Amazon box from the closet, because you know we stuff all our boxes in there when we don't need them anymore. And I took the box and I put it right over the microphone, and I started hitting it on the tape, and it sounded kind of like this. Which, honestly, in my opinion, is pretty good for a cardboard box. It sounds a lot like an actual bass drum. The only problem I had with it was that it didn't have a lot of big solid bass tone to it. It had a lot of punch, as we call it, so it had a lot of the high end, but the bass itself didn't carry very much. The good news is that when I was in that little hall closet where we put all our extra stuff, I found some wrapping paper tubes, and the wrapping paper tubes are really fun to play with. If you've never played with one, go hit one. It sounds kind of cool. But I recorded a bunch of different things. I recorded myself rubbing my nail along it, and it sounds kind of like this. The coolest thing I did with this tube was I hit one end of it with my palm. After a little bit of working with it, I got it to sound pretty good. And I also hit the tube without closing one end with my palm. I didn't like that as much, and I kind of wanted it to resonate more. I wanted it to be a bigger sound. So instead I decided to throw the tube in the air and hit it so that I wasn't muting it at all. And that was fun to do, and it sounded pretty good. So I took all the tube sounds and I panned them different directions, and I put them all in the drum kit so they sound like this. The next bit of garbage I found in my room was this empty almond container. And if you've never had the almonds from Costco that are like covered in chocolate, those things are freaking amazing. This one sadly happened to be empty, and so I was about to throw it away, but I was like, hey, we should try hitting it, you know. And so I put it in front of the microphone, and I found out that it could make two different sounds. And the first one sounds like this, and the other one sounds like this. I panned those left and right so that they sound like bongos, kinda. I don't know, some kind of pitched drums, you know. I think they sound pretty cool. I might use them in the drum beat, we'll see. The last thing I needed for my fake drum set was a hi-hat sound, and a hi-hat normally sounds like this. So to get that hi-hat sound, I tried a couple different things. The first thing I tried was hitting coins together, which is kind of boring, and then I tried flicking the coins, which sounds cool in real life, but for some reason my microphone wouldn't pick it up, so that was disappointing. And then I had some receipts lying around, so I started ripping them, and after a few tries, I got this sound. So now I'm going to make the drum beat, and I'm going to start with just the bass drum. So I think I'm going to probably use both the tube closed and the box together. So it's going to sound a little like this. Okay, I think we're off to a good start with that bass. Now we're going to add a snare drum. For the snare drum, I'm going to combine the open wrapping paper tube and the cup sound. Alright, let's add that and see what it sounds like. That seems to fit pretty well, so now we're going to add the hi-hat, and for the hi-hat I'm going to use the ripped paper sound. That sounds alright, but it's a little too boring for me, so I think we're going to spice up the rhythm a little bit with a really high wrapping paper sound. Alright, I think it's time for some chocolate almonds, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is just add some more sounds from my Chick-fil-A cup. Well hey, I'd say we have a pretty good drum part written here. Who knew you could make such a good drum sound out of garbage? The next step in making a song is usually the bass. For this song we're going to use rubber bands. I tried to tune the rubber bands as I recorded them, but it didn't work very well. I ended up using these three sounds. I like the first two because they're really bassy, and I like the third one because it sounds really rubber bandy. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds like a rubber band should. So I'm going to layer all three of them on top of each other so they sound like this. Full disclosure, it did not sound this good at first. It took me like 40 minutes to get these rubber bands in tune with each other. But now that they're in tune, I think they sound really good. Now that we have a solid bass part, I think we're going to add some percussive chords. For the chords, we're going to use the sound of a Coke bottle. At first I tried blowing on the Coke bottle, but that didn't work very well. And so I started hitting it. And I noticed that you can get two different sounds out of it. One high and one low. I recorded both of them, and then I mixed them together. And then I changed the pitch, so that the higher one and the lower one are at the same pitch. And then, through the miracle of stereo, I panned one to the right and one to the left. And it sounds like this now. Which I think sounds really cool considering it came from a Coke bottle. Here's the part we're going to have the Coke bottle play. The last part of a song that I usually make is the lead or melody part. For this part, we're going to go back to the good old Chick-fil-A cup and use the sound of me blowing into the straw. It sounds like this.
Will you cut that out?
It's kind of annoying, but I chopped it up so that only this part was left. And then I used the same stereo technique that I did with the bottles, so it sounds like this. Which I think is pretty impressive considering that it went from this to this. But here's our lead part. Well, now that we've made all our parts, let's go ahead and put them together and make it into a song. We'll start with the drums, then add the bass, then add the Coke bottles, which I've added a little bit of a delay effect to, and then finally we'll add the lead part and have them all together. Well, there you go, folks. We made a song entirely out of garbage. You really can make music with anything if you use a little ingenuity. Like I said, music is everywhere, even in your garbage can. Thanks for listening. Bye.